Hi everyone, and welcome to the Harvest of the Month Local Foods Training on Brassicas. A little introduction, my name is Robin Kerber and I am the Farm and Sea to School Coordinator for the Child Nutrition Program with Maine Department of Education. My background is in farming and culinary arts, and I'm excited to offer this series of local foods training to everyone here in the state of Maine and beyond to expand our knowledge and understanding of using local produce in our schools and early child care centers. So to complete the local foods training, in order to receive additional reimbursement in the local produce fund, you need to do several things. The first one is to watch this presentation in its entirety, then to watch all of the culinary videos and to download the accompanying recipes that go with the culinary videos, and then to email me and let me know when you've completed these steps. And somewhere along this presentation, you will there will be a little trick question, so I'll know for sure if you've actually completed the training. And then, of course, to receive the additional reimbursement as part of the local produce fund, there's more information on our website, and emailing the Child Nutrition Program for more information is a good start. So local brassicas. Greens and whites and purples all winter long. Brassicas are becoming slightly more popular. It's funny to see the rise to fame of brassicas like kale, but they still are kind of one of those food groups that, or one of those plant families that a lot of people don't really know what to do with them. They can be kind of intimidating because they have pretty potent flavors. So we're going to get into how to get over that and become comfortable and familiar with using them in our own kitchens. So brassica vegetables include, there's some pretty common ones out there: broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, turnips, collard greens, of course kale, bok choy, and then there's tons of ones that I'll touch upon here that are less common, less familiar, but are still pretty easy to find, especially here in Maine, where we have a lot of farms grow brassicas. They do really well here in our shoulder seasons, meaning spring and fall, because they do like the kind of colder weather. They're pretty cold hardy, and they actually get even sweeter in those colder shoulder seasons. So brassicas, or cruciferous vegetables, refers to a species in the genus Brassica, which is part of the mustard family. It's a big group including everything from canola to cauliflower to cabbage, plus lesser known species like daikon and tatsoi. A lot of Asian cooking greens are actually in this family. And you'll see as I go into the different varieties later on in this presentation how many of them we consider to be your just Asian cooking greens. If you eat them raw, most of these vegetables have a slightly bitter undertone, but cooking them brings out a very pleasant and mild sweetness. Think roasted cauliflower or kale fried in bacon fat. So the flowers, seeds, stalks, and tender leaves of many species of brassica can be eaten raw or cooked. Almost all parts of some species have been developed for food. So basically, brassicas all come from one common plant. And then over time, they've been bred to have certain traits be the main component. But it's pretty cool. They can all be traced back to this one wild mustard plant. So almost all parts of some species have been developed for food, including the root, think turnips, the stems, think kohlrabi, the leaves, think cabbage, collard greens, and kale, the flowering part of the plant, think cauliflower and broccoli, the buds, think Brussels sprouts and cabbage, and the seeds, including mustard seed. Some forms are white or purple in foliage color, which is pretty neat. This photo I've included here are the decorative varieties of cabbage, which I always think are really funny. You can see them, like, I think this photo is from New York City, but sometimes people grow them, you know, next to their flowers, and they are, of course, edible. They're kind of cabbage, but they've been bred over time to have like a very beautiful crown and beautiful colors. So this kind of brassica is considered to be decorative, but of course the ones we're talking about in this presentation are all the ones that we're going to be eating. All right, so like the onion family, brassicas are a group of formidable chemical warriors with strong flavors. From just 2 weedy natives of the Mediterranean and Central Asia, we have managed to develop more than a dozen major crops of different kinds. Some leaves, some flowers, some stems, some seeds, like I just mentioned. Then there are a dozen or more relatives, notable the radishes and mustards, and crosses between species. Altogether, a rich and ongoing collaboration between nature's inventiveness and our own. Many brassicas have a natural defense built into their cell walls. When damaged, these flavors are activated, and the result is a bitter, pungent, strong-smelling plant. This plant's natural defense mechanism is effective enough to have inspired a notorious man-made version, the mustard gas of World War I. So I just included this kind of silly graphic of World War I, actually this is World War II, gas ID poster. And so really what this is talking about is that plants in the Brassica family have very strong flavor components. And when they're damaged, i.e. cut with a knife or ripped or broken or something like that, they're released and they're very strong. So that's why if you're just going to have a salad with a bunch of like mustard greens and arugula and some of these other brassicas, kale, it can just be really intensely flavored. But if you cook it down or you add, you know, maybe some fats or some lemon juice, it really helps to kind of lighten those flavors, make them less intense. But they're really just the plant's natural defense mechanisms. Because plants, you know, a plant in the ground with its roots, it's not going anywhere. So how is it going to protect itself against predators? It can't, you know, claw at them. It can't bite them like a snake. So it has to build up those flavors that are released when it is damaged or attacked by an insect or an animal. And I just included this photo here. This is not one that I took myself. I just found the perfect photo online. But, you know, growing up, I really didn't like greens. I didn't like brassicas. I didn't like leafy greens because my dad would always just kind of throw them on top of whatever we were eating. This is like the perfect photo. I feel like I've looked down at my dinner plate, you know, 1,000 times as a kid and seen something like this delicious spaghetti that's then just been covered in, you know, raw greens. And as a kid, like that's not appealing at all. Those flavors are so strong, so intense, so bitter, and it, you know, it kind of ruin the whole meal, in my opinion. And he would always just call them a mess of greens, which is a Southern thing to say. But, you know, really just taking the time to put a dressing on them, to cook them down a little bit, to add some flavors, it makes those bitter flavors a lot less intense and much more palatable. All right, so there are many, many wonderful varieties of brassicas to choose from as we look for ways to incorporate them on our school menus. Brassicas is one of the months of the Harvest of the Month program. So we have the poster in the background there shows a few samples of brassicas that you can use. And now we're just gonna go over some of them and talk about how we can use them in our school kitchens and possibly expose you to a few new varieties along the way. All right, kohlrabi. So kohlrabi is a kind of funny looking plant that is in the Brassica family, and really the part of the plant that's been developed here is that bulb, that kind of root structure. And you can eat the leaves, but you're really going for that sort of bulb mound. They look like a bumpy green or purple knob. They have leaves that sprout up from the top. What you see in this picture here is what's growing above the ground. And I remember farming in college, we would call them alien blueberries because we grew the purple variety and they just looked just so funny and so bizarre growing out there in the field. But they're good. They have a pretty mild taste, kind of similar to broccoli. I mean, all of this is going to taste kind of similar because they're all coming from that same plant. But this one's pretty sweet. And then the picture here is just, you know, cut into some sticks. Looks like they've been tossed in some seasoning and possibly some oil. and then baked in the oven for like a healthy alternative to French fries. So kohlrabi is a really great brassica to incorporate. It's not too intensely flavored, and it's very versatile. Broccoli rabe, or broccolini. So this is it looks a lot like broccoli, but it's got longer stems. This is one that's been developed to, broccoli was really developed to accentuate that big flowering bud, where broccolini was less focused on that and more focused on developing those leaves and those long tender stems. So this is something you'll often see kind of like stir fried up. It's in a lot of like Asian cuisine. It tastes like broccoli. I don't really think that there's too much of a difference there. I personally like it better because it's less about that big flowering head and more about, the variety in the stems and the leaves. So that's a good one, and it's also pretty easy to find here in Maine. The Napa cabbage, also known as the Chinese cabbage. This is a really great one as far as yield. You're not really wasting a lot here when you're processing it. You can see in this photo you've got a little bit of a stem at the bottom that you'll remove, but for the most part, the whole thing is edible. It looks like a cabbage that you see, the kind of the round, tight cabbage, but it's a little bit looser. The leaves are more frilly, and it has that sort of elongated shape. And it's got a pretty mild taste to it. You could chop this up raw. The flavors are not so intense that you have to cook it, but it is often stir fried up or thrown into soup, and it has a really long shelf life as well. So this is a great one if you buy a bunch of Napa cabbage and you're suddenly overwhelmed by the sheer mass of it all. They do hold for quite a long time in your refrigerator. Tatsoi. So this is, kind of a fun one that you would maybe find like a farmer's market. It's becoming more common, but it's still pretty unique. It's one of those Asian greens, dark green leaves shaped like little spoons when they're raw. Oftentimes it's cooked. I thought this dish looked particularly good with the kind of ooey gooey egg on top with the mushrooms. But this one, just treat it like you would a bok choy or any kind of cooking green. The flavor is similar to arugula, which has that really peppery bite, but it's much more mild. I love this one just thrown into salads, kind of like a spinach substitute. It's pretty great. So that's our tatsoi. Mizuna is another great green, either raw or cooked. This particular variety has some really beautiful purple stems with the green leaves, but depending on your varieties, it could be all purple, it could be all green. It's kind of peppery, mustardy flavor, but also relatively mild. And yeah, so that's a fun one. That's Mizuna. The beloved cabbage. This is a great one. Braised. I think that's like the best way to cook cabbage is just low and slow in your oven, and it really just it just gets so sweet. Then of course cabbage is what sauerkraut is, just simply thyme, salt, cabbage, and you've got a really great homemade sauerkraut. Cabbage comes in green or red or white, all different kinds of varieties out there, and it's pretty mild in flavor, so that one is pretty versatile. Of course, kale, not one of my favorite brassicas, but just thanks to really good marketing, I'm not sure who started this, but someone certainly wanted kale to become the next lettuce of the United States, because it is so incredibly popular now. And honestly, I don't know, there's a lot of really great brassicas out there with much more flavor, and you can do a lot more with them, but kale has definitely stolen the spotlight for a while now. So what can we do with it in our kitchens? We can come up with like a really great dressing and bake them in the oven for kale chips. We can chop it up and throw it into soups. We can blend it into hummus. This picture here, you can see that they do have pretty long kind of fibrous stems. So what I do when I'm cooking my kale is I rip off those leaves, put them in a bowl, and then I'm left with the stems, and I chop them real fine. And if I'm making something like a soup, I will throw those chopped kale stems in with the onions so they have a long cook time. And then I'll take the leaves and rip them up or chop them up and throw them into the soup at the very end. But you really want to make sure that you're giving those kale stems a lot of time to cook because they are pretty tough. And then if you're going to use the kale raw, a great trick is to do the same thing where you're separating the stems, chopping them up fine, and then with the leaves, ripping them up and actually massaging. You'll see in a lot of recipes, people call for massaging the kale, and like that sounds kind of bizarre, but what you're going to do is you're going to add, you know, the oil and the acid, which is most likely going to be lemon juice, and you're just going to massage that into the leaves. And I think I get into that later in the presentation, but essentially what that does is the acid in particular breaks down sort of the tough cell walls of those leaves and makes it much easier to chew and to digest, and it's just much more palatable. So you really want to take the time to just spend 5 minutes just kind of like working those that lemon juice oil into the leaves. It'll make a huge difference. Bok choy, similar to tat soy, it looks like an elongated cabbage at the base, but then it's pretty loose at the top with these dark green leaves. It can grow really big, or you'll often see it as baby bok choy. And it's great, you know, this one typically is cooked. You're not often going to see recipes call for it raw, but it does really well steaming, sauteing. You can eat the whole thing, like in this picture here. That's some great presentation. It might be a little bit intimidating though to offer some kiddos just like a whole bok choy. But yeah, it's very versatile, and I would say a pretty mild flavor with the bok choy. All right, so we've got our collard greens. Collard greens, we often think Southern food, and when we think Southern food, we think kind of those rich, high-fat flavors and ingredients, and collard greens are no exception to that. Despite being a healthy brassica, they're often paired with pretty high-fat ingredients. They're often cooked in bacon fat, and no one's going to complain about that, but of course that's not really what we're going for here. We're looking for a lot of flavor, but not necessarily coming from a lot of those high-fat ingredients. So how can we, you know, kind of replicate some of those flavors? We could do, you know, cook them down in a stock, in like a really hearty meat stock, so you're getting a lot of that flavor that you'd get from cooking it in bacon, but in like a much healthier way. And really, collard greens are awesome because they hold up super well. So if you were to chop a bunch of collard greens and throw them into a soup and let it simmer for an hour and come back to it, those greens would still be, they'd be cooked, but they would really hold up their shape, versus, you know, kale can kind of disintegrate, and spinach like certainly sort of dissolves, but collards hold up really well. So they're a great one for just sauteing. You can add them to different slaws or salads. Another picture here is someone used them for like little sushi rolls. You could use them for like a gluten-free alternative to a tortilla. They have a kind of a stronger taste, but I think it's not intimidating, and certainly if you're pairing it with a bunch of other ingredients, it's not overwhelming at all. So collard greens, lots of potential there, and they don't just have to be a Southern food. We can take advantage of them up here in Maine. All right, watercress is kind of a unique one. It's an aquatic flowering plant in the Brassica family, which is pretty interesting. It's often grown in shallow streams and water if you're finding it wild. I don't really know how they grow it conventionally, but it's also one of the oldest salad greens. Ancient Romans dressed raw watercress with pepper, cumin, and fermented fish sauce. So you could take some inspiration from that idea, maybe minus the fermented fish sauce. That might not go over too well. But yeah, it's also really beautiful. A garnish. This is a photo of a watercress soup. It has a really great peppery flavor, so it could be substituted for anything that calls for arugula. Cauliflower is probably my favorite brassica because I think it's one of those things where growing up, we didn't really eat too much cauliflower, and then through culinary school, didn't really do much with cauliflower. It always kind of just felt like this like blah vegetable, and I think I had in my head that like bright, vibrant colored vegetables were healthy, so cauliflower being all white must be pretty lacking in nutrients, and that's so versatile. So you can eat the stem, you can sear it, and then you can cook it in the oven, and it becomes like this really delicious, tender, caramelized thing. You can boil it, and you can puree it with mashed potatoes, and it's pretty. Cauliflower alone doesn't have a lot of flavor, so it's a really great blank canvas for adding kind of whatever you want to it. I like to make a cauliflower rice. So you take the raw cauliflower, cut it up into big chunks, throw it into your food processor, and you pulse it until it becomes like rice-sized pieces. And then use that for really anything that calls for rice. I'll take that raw cauliflower, I'll steam it up with a bunch of veggies, I'll add some soy sauce, some ginger, some garlic, crack an egg into it, scramble it around, and make an awesome fried rice that uses cauliflower, so it's much healthier. But it really, really is hard to tell the difference. So cauliflower is awesome. Definitely get creative with that. Broccoli, we all know what broccoli looks like. We all know what it tastes like. I love roasting it. For this training, we have a couple of recipes. One of them from our Harvest of the Month material is for a raw broccoli salad, which is like a really simple dressing. And then we also have a really great roasted one with a simple tahini dressing. So tahini is like the ground sesame seeds. And that's an awesome one as well. Broccoli is super versatile, raw, roasted, steamed, you can kind of do whatever you want with broccoli. Brussels sprouts is another one that has gotten a lot of attention recently. I think maybe more so in restaurants and in home kitchens, because you'll often see fried Brussels sprouts. Of course, it's going to be delicious. Anything fried is going to be awesome, and for a lot of reasons, Brussels sprouts taste particularly good fried. Now you think about how you can do that in your kitchen in a healthier way, maybe tossing them in some olive oil and some sea salt and pepper, roasting them in a really hot oven. So you're getting that crispiness on the outer leaves, and then the inside gets like roasted and tender. It's just awesome. So Brussels sprouts can also be shaved raw and put into salads. Pretty versatile one with the Brussels sprouts too. All right, and now just some tips and some tricks for using brassicas. This picture here is a roasted cauliflower, which is a really great, I don't think I mentioned that on the cauliflower side, but it gets really nice and brown and caramelized in the oven. This one looks like it probably just has a little bit of does do really well in high heat because it kills off a lot of those bitter flavors and makes them much sweeter. And then you could also roast them low and slow. So you're either going to go hot for a short amount of time to kind of caramelize it, or you're going to go roast low and slow, and you're going to get really great results for either of those. And then I think sometimes in a lot of school kitchens and in home kitchens too, we can be like a little bit afraid of using too much oil because we just think oil is fat, fat is bad and all of that. But brassicas in particular really do need a little bit of oil, and it goes a long way. So think about that kale salad with a little bit of olive oil. Think about, just, tossing your vegetables in some olive oil before roasting them. It just brings out so much flavor. So do not be intimidated. It really is needed here with the brassicas. And then, of course, I mentioned massaging with the acid, like a lemon juice, to break down some of that toughness of our leafy greens here. That's also a great tip. And the brassica recipes that we have for this training, we've got a roasted fish and crispy slaw wrap. This is a great one. We use some local fish as part of a program we have running right now where fish is being donated to Maine schools. And then it's just got like a really flavorful slaw, some fresh avocado, and it's served on a whole wheat tortilla. We've got a soup with some really great Italian flavoring, some chopped up turkey meat, and full of different brassicas. We've got that roasted broccoli with tahini dressing recipe that I mentioned, and then a recipe from Harvest of the Month for the broccoli salad. So here's what a couple of them look like, and these are all going to be available on our website to be downloaded and hopefully used in your kitchens. And then definitely check out the videos that we've created as well. And the videos all feature Chef Ben Ramsdell, and he came into our kitchens here in Augusta to demonstrate these recipes for you all. He's a culinary coordinator and chef educator at Maine General Hospital. He's helped with these trainings in the past, and we are lucky to recruit him for this training as well as the apple training that we did earlier in the fall. He's also a board member of Full Plates, Full Potential, and he's committed to addressing the problems of child hunger that are systemic throughout Maine. So it was really great to work with Ben on this, and hopefully you all get a lot from the training. All right, so back to this slide. To complete the virtual local foods training, you must watch this presentation in its entirety. So check, you did that. And then don't forget to watch all those culinary videos to download, review, and hopefully use in your kitchens the recipes. And then email me when you're done, and let me know when you finish this part of the training. Tell me a way that you've served a brassica in your school kitchen. So there's a little thing you got to do, so I know you completed it. And I hope everybody has enjoyed learning about brassicas. Lots of potential here to use them in our kitchen. Don't be intimidated by some of those stronger, bitter flavors in the beginning. All it takes is just a couple tips and tricks in the kitchen, and they can be quite delicious. So please reach out if you have any questions, you want to share recipes or photos, and I would love to hear all about it. Thanks so much.